Copper is one of the hottest and best investment stories in this commodity super cycle. And there's a stock out there that offers us a dividend yield of 8 to 10% per year in the future in the copper market. If you like commodities, if you like high dividend yields and above average stock price appreciation potential, this stock is for you. Let's get into it. Bull Market Lifestyle presents Hot Dividend Winners for max dividend profits through high yields and high stock upside. Welcome to Hot Dividend Winners. My name is Danny Waham. We're going to jump right into it. We don't need to talk about the copper story. You know the copper story. It's one of the best supply-demand stories in this commodity super cycle. So people have been asking me nonstop, rightfully so, hey, what are good copper investments? And we talked about Amerigo Resources, another dividend player that I recommended here in High Dividend Winners weeks in July after the Rural Symposium. Has been a great stock for us, and also now could become interesting after this is the weekly. Let me switch to the daily for you. Here we go. After a recent pullback. But the stock that I want to talk about is a very different story than Amerigo Resources. It's a turnaround story of one of the largest commodity companies in the world. So we have the company value with us. It is a quality company that is rebuilding its business. And this is where things start to get really interesting. We are talking about Vale, the Brazilian iron ore and base metal giant. So this is the first thing I like. If you saw my suggestions and presentations on Petrobras, the big Brazilian oil company, last fall, and I know from the feedback that quite a few of you decided, hey, that's some solid sauerkraut logic there. I'm gonna get in on Petrobras last fall, winter. Well, that was a great trade so far, and if you ask me, I don't believe it's over yet. We're talking, this was the area when I was talking about Petrobras. So as you can see, we got, what is it, like a 50% up or something right now, and in the top obviously was a lot more. And we're not finished with it yet. And one of the reasons why I told you this was so interesting is because with Petrobras, you could not only play the rebound in oil and the comeback in oil, but also Brazil. And Vale, one of the biggest companies in Brazil, is the same story. So you profit from two of the really interesting tailwinds, the comeback of the emerging markets, which will be led by the commodity-centric economies in the emerging markets. And this is certainly what Brazil is all about, and the copper story. Now, obviously, there's a major problem with Vale. We will always have problems with stocks that offer us the potential of high dividend yields and high stock upside. And a great story, growth story for the future, which will then unlock the stock potential and unlock the high dividend yields on our invested income. Otherwise, we wouldn't get this opportunity. The only question is this a permanent problem? Is this a structural problem? Or is this a problem that can be changed, can be improved, or ideally even solved? In the terms of Vale, it is the following. Vale is the biggest iron ore producer in the world. That was great in the last commodity supercycle when China was building ghost towns and highways to nowhere like crazy and was importing iron ore, and the stock of Vale went absolutely nuts. Now, this time, long gone, as you know by now. Real estate construction in China is basically dead. And you can see this in the chart of Vale, and you can see this obviously also in the business. Now, the business has stabilized in the iron ore a little bit, but it is still problematic. And even more problematic is that to keep it simple, about 80% currently of the revenue and the profit come from the iron ore part. This part of the Vale business is called Iron Ore Solutions. The other 20%, and this is where things get interesting, come from a business segment that's called Vale Base Metals, and that mostly includes copper and some nickel. And this is where things get really interesting. The market is just looking at Vale as the old Vale, the iron ore specialist. And then they look at China and say, well, that story is not working anymore. And that's true. But the management realized this already years ago, and they are now aggressively growing their copper business. And this is where things get really interesting. The goal of Vale is to increase their copper production till 2035, so in this commodity supercycle, by 80% to around 700,000 tons. That would make Vale one of the major copper players. And if we add that on top of the projected price appreciation for copper in this supercycle, now we're cooking with gas. And this is the interesting part. See, if you are a turnaround specialist, then you know this. If not, then there's a theme in the turnaround market that says you're going to make the most money when things usually go from terrible to just average. Not even good, just average. And the reason is because at the terrible stage, the companies are so undervalued that you get this extra stock price appreciation potential. Most investors think you get the big appreciation when things go from average to good or from good to great. No, because then you have higher valuations. This is especially true for the emerging markets, which heavily depend on international capital. So when things are terrible, the international investors just throw their hands up in the air and walk away, and the stocks just plummet because the domestic purchasing power in the markets cannot compensate for the international capital, and that's when you get really cheap stocks. So right now, we are basically with Vale at the end of the terrible stage. So we got all the stage of when business becomes average in the coming years. And then I believe with the copper boom, we will actually get to the stage of good. I don't think we're going to get to great because the iron ore business, but we can get to good. And man, that will still offer us great upside, because here's the deal. What we are betting on is that Vale will increase its copper business. The market will catch on. Right now, the market basically sees Vale as an iron ore specialist that also has a copper nickel side business. But if Vale can grow their copper business, then in the future, this could become a company that will be appreciated in the market as a diversified commodity giant with iron ore and copper. Maybe 50-50, more likely 60-40 iron ore copper, but in the vein of a Rio Tinto. And that makes this story really interesting because nobody is valuing this copper part of Vale yet. But that is the part that the management is putting their focus on. And if you follow copper projects and what's happening in the copper market in Latin America, then you know Vale is extremely active. They're all over the place there, having their hands in all kinds of copper projects. I actually would love it if the management would go out and start buying up some copper companies and their projects, because that way the market would realize, oh, they're transitioning to this diversified iron or copper company, and it's not the old Vale anymore as it is perceived right now. But exactly that is our play, and that is our chance. Now, the dividend yield at the moment is somewhere between 6 to 9%, depending what you predict will be the earnings for 2026 and 2027. Let's take the middle, so we get to around 7.5. That is already attractive. Now, short term, because of the iron ore business and the problems that this whole sector has, I don't think there's much growth in the dividend. We might even see the dividend go down short term to maybe 5%. But the management is also restructuring the iron ore business and trying to move up on the production quality ladder to the more high-priced iron ore products, not the lower-end stuff that was needed in the China construction boom in the last supercycle. Now, that brings in better margin, but really the expansion of the copper business in combination with the appreciation of the copper prices will lead to higher dividend yields in the future in a company that traditionally has been a high dividend payout company. And I believe that five years down the road, when it's becoming obvious that the transition and the growth in the copper company, in the copper business is working and is happening, and the copper price is going to be a lot higher than they are today, that the dividend is going to reach an amount that can yield us 8 to 10% on our invested capital. On top, I think that the stock can offer us a double. Now, try to compare that with the Mag 7 and AI stock bonds that are out there. None of those offer this type of combination. That is pretty juicy for me and quite interesting. Now, again, this is not a recommendation. This is just a presentation. I'm not your financial advisor. It might not work for you. Full disclosure, I am invested in Vale. I plan to add to my positions if I get cheap prices, which, as you can see in the chart right now, we are seeing a pullback in the stock. But I look at it as I get a secret copper winner that nobody's talking about. I get Brazil exposure. I get about a double upside potential on stock appreciation long term. And I'm going to get a dividend yield that's probably going to be between 5 to 7% short term. But long term, easy 8 and 10, maybe could go as high as 12% per year. That is really interesting and attractive to me, because right now the market is basically saying the Chinese real estate construction market is dead. And it's valuing the iron ore business and the future predictions as such. Fair enough. But that means I get a joker in terms of Beijing stimulating its economy and keep stimulating it. And all of a sudden, the fantasy and the narrative comes back into the market. Oh, China stimulating its real estate sector. That's going to increase iron ore demand. Now, I think that's going to happen. We will see how successful it can be, but I don't think that Beijing has any other options than doing that. And that is not priced into the stock at all. I get that as a bonus on top of all the other things that I told you about. Now I need to be patient with it. And I also need to know, yeah, this is not the multi-bagger superstar stock, but that's not what I'm looking for when I want to buy a dividend stock. And that's what my mining stocks in my portfolio are for. When I buy a dividend stock, I want to buy a stock of an established company that has proven itself, in Vale's case, even in hard times. And boy, times have been hard for iron ore producers in the past decade. And that has the growth stories that I like. So, therefore, this is the type of hot dividend winner that I am looking for. Might be interesting for you. We see us tomorrow. I wish you a great day. Hey, happy Wine Wednesday. Have a good glass of wine. Never a bad idea in life. Bye-bye.